Your angels are speaking to you. Do you hear them? Welcome to The Calling of Light with author and empathic spiritual tarot reader Anne-Marie Odell. The Calling of Light offers direct empathic insight and relatable spiritual topics, interviews with special spiritual guests, and straight talk call-in readings. Kick back and enjoy free-form spirit tea with Anne-Marie, the way you like it best when you want to simplify. Here is your host, Anne-Marie Odell.
Karen Herrick, Ph.D., which we will call Reverend Karen Herrick, has spent decades researching spiritual phenomena, how this information impacts mental health and overall well-being, and the need for educating mental health professionals on these experiences. Hi, Karen. How are you today?
I'm good, Anne-Marie. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I was thrilled to be able to, you brought two different kinds of subject matter that intrigued me. Of course, one is the spiritual. I love psychology, and I also love the spiritual field. And sometimes they can be opposite ends of the spectrum, but I am both of them. And I was fascinated to see that somebody else out there was the same. What are 4 steps to move through grief and loss?
Well, to be able to come to talk to someone about it, which a lot of people don't, they just suffer in silence. And they love to come and talk about, the loved one. And I usually ask for a picture, which they have because they have it on their phone now. And so I can hear about the person they lost. And then what problems are you having? And, because of this. And then where do you think he is? Where do you think Charlie is? And they always have an answer.
Really?
Which I love. Well, he's either in heaven or he's somewhere happy, something like that. So then actually they believe in life after death. And then I say to them, well, as we go on with our work, not today, because I've just met with you, would you like to hear about what some of the modern researchers are saying about life after death? And they say, sure. So then I kind of leave it open to be able to talk about the different types of research that have been done with mediumship or with just being able to, like Raymond Moody takes people back and they talk about, living with Charlie and what it was like and show pictures of Charlie and et cetera, et cetera. And after doing that for a few hours, then he puts him in this room that he has in his attic. And there's just a big mirror up on the wall and they sit on a pillow and they either have a manifestation of that person there, or when they go back to their hotel room, they see their person or their person visits, or if they go home, they see them. So
Karen, what is your specific job? What is it that you do for people?
I'm a therapist. So people come when they're having trouble with their daily life because of something that's happened. I started out in addictions, so alcohol and drug, and then people in those families have a lot of different types of experiences. Sometimes we wouldn't call them spiritual, but they're weird. And so they tell me a lot of those kinds of stories because people in alcoholic and drug addicted families have had a lot of trauma. And it's been found through research that those people then are able to disassociate easier as they're growing up. So if you took a group of people in trauma and then a group of people that supposedly had a normal life, which is usually dysfunctional but not so dysfunctional, the group of people with trauma would have more near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, or seeing an angel or seeing their deceased mom, because they're used to disassociating in order to just live there.
So why don't we start with 3 tips for developing a richer appreciation of life through spiritual experiences?
Okay, well, yeah, sure. People that have had a spiritual experience, which is sometimes I call it an experience with a transcendent being that goes beyond your religious affiliation, but an exceptional experience where you felt awe or very, very happy or peaceful and calm. And after that happens, people then do believe that there is a God or a higher power in the universe, which makes them feel safer. And they also tend to believe that they have a purpose in life now, even though they may not know what that purpose is, because many people are looking for other things, and they're really there. And then they seem to be able to learn how to lower your mental level. I call it that, but it's really thinking. Like, stop thinking, just breathe, and enjoy more of those kinds of moments, gardening or taking the dog out or reading a good book and just relaxing on the couch and giving yourself some of that time that you really deserve.
Addiction to analyzing
Yes.
is one of the biggest problems I think so many people have. And as a intuitive worker, taking lots of calls from people, I can always tell the type A go-getter women, executives, who either find that they are living their purpose in life, but then along comes somebody new into the management field who doesn't quite understand their diva self.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, this almost transformational thinking of overanalyzing begins to haunt them to the point of almost going wacky, because they cannot relate to changing their persona. They wonder where they are in life. They don't understand through the overanalyzing all the time that they are actually going away from work, frustrated, coming to work with another way of thinking, then overanalyzing again every attitude of each person towards them. And I find that these people, usually women that I get, are really having a spiritual meltdown. And I think it happens to a lot of women when they hit that sort of wise woman stage.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, I would call that kind of a trance psychic reality also, which you discuss. What is a trance psychic reality where miracles are created?
Well, there's actually 3 metaphysical systems that are kind of swirling around us all the time. The first one is a sensory reality, which you and I are in. You know, we're on Zoom. It's past, present, and present, past, and future. And this is where we live most of the time. And for some people, this is all they have. And then there's the clairvoyant reality, where you go to a card reader or an astrologer or a psychic or a medium, where I recommend that people go to mediums if they're in chronic grief. And
that's interesting. Now. Explain that. Why? Why do you say that?
Well, because they're feeling such loss and maybe a lot of guilt that maybe they don't even know about or won't admit to. And they just can't reconcile that they lost this person. And how am I really going to, live without them? And so if they can go to a medium, which probably their family and their religion says, it's a no, we don't do that. Mm-hmm. We can make a connection, and love is the greatest energy there is. And I always tell them, I can't guarantee that your wife's going to come in or your mother or whoever it is. But, I always ask them what kind of recent deaths have they had. And somebody's going to come in. And you're going to get a message from the medium that shows you that there is life after this life. And then we just go on to another place and we become a spirit. We can't talk anymore, but we can send thoughts. And once they know that.
Can I add to that? Can I add to that?
Yeah, sure.
We'll have the belief that as each of us begins to die, and we are going through the moments of our life, we're leaving messages for all those people that we interacted with that are kind of like going into the cloud, the internet cloud, only the universal spiritual cloud. And to
Okay.
me, I think a lot of times it isn't that mediums are necessarily speaking to the relative in themselves, but they are tuning into that special message that was left in the cloud for them by their significant others, which is just as important, because I believe that a lot of times I have this feeling that those that are on the other side, though they love their loved ones, may possibly not want to come back, but do have that beautiful message for them. So I was just going to say that's another way of looking. There's still a message. It doesn't have to be the relative standing right there talking.
Okay. But I have found, and they have found, that that's what they get. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and then I say, before you leave the medium, find out how in the future you could connect with your loved one so that you don't need a medium. So, and usually they say, through dreams, and if you get a thought more than 3 times, then that's me trying to tell you something, different messages like that. So they do realize that they can connect, and, it's always good to go. If you want to go back to the medium, that's fine. But they do develop some kind of a system where they can pray and they can get messages, and maybe in their dreams, and they just feel happier, and they're not so afraid of death, which when Freud said we were all so afraid of death that nobody would ever talk about it. So I think it's wonderful that we can now say that there is a spiritual side, and in the clairvoyant now, where you just feel like you're in now, and you really understand that feeling. It's very happy, and you can get there in prayer and also meditation, that kind of thing. But they really feel connected. And then there's the transpsychic reality, which you mentioned. That's the third reality where miracles happen. And some doctors have said that they see miracles every day. And I think the last statistic I saw was that 55% of physicians said they had seen a miracle.
That's awesome.
Isn't it?
It is. Would you say that miracles and manifestation are somewhat the same?
Yeah, I don't know what you tell me what you believe a manifestation is.
Manifesting, when relatives, I think anytime you get a group of people that pray together for a result,
Okay.
or anytime that you get people that are making wishes for the world crisis or some situation, and all of those energies get together, I believe miracles can happen as well.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And
The
it's
power
what
of prayer and thought is unbelievable.
electrical.
Yes.
It is electrical.
Yes. The whole thing is electrical. I mean,
It is.
we have an electrical system we live in.
Right. That is cool. I like that. But so do you combine the elements of the paranormal with because that's not always normal for what your profession is.
Oh, it's not normal at all for what my profession is. I mean, psychology has been terrible about recognizing that people have near-death experiences or mystical experiences. In fact, in 1994, every few years they come out with a new diagnostic manual. It's called the DSM, whatever it is. So it was the DSM-4 back in 1994, and they needed statistics to get in. So they had actually statistics that near-death and mystical experiences were happening to 30 to 40% of the population.
Wow.
And
really?
And these few doctors from San Francisco proposed a new diagnosis criteria, right? So they sent in, like, I don't know, 8 to 10 pages of what the diagnosis would read. And the Committee on Religion for the American Psychiatric Association got that down to 1 inch. And it's now a V code for spiritual, I forget what it's called, spiritual development of some type. and they did not mention out of near death or mystical experiences. So therapists do not know that they had a chance here to put it in the book. All the rules were there, and they just didn't accept it. Now 40 to 50% of the population in the United States and in Great Britain are having some type of spiritual experience. And I can't wait till it gets over 50, because I think we'll be hearing more and more about it then, if it's over 50% of the population, because there's a lot of people that are walking around, like people that have near-death experience, they wait 7 years before they tell someone usually.
Like pilots that won't tell they just ran into an alien.
Yes.
When I always say, I'm not a therapist, but after advising for people with problems as a psychic therapist or psychic advisor since over 40 years, there can only be so many problem types before you start to realize it all goes into a pattern, right? But the thing that I noticed that frustrates so many people about therapy is so many therapists go by a protocol. They don't open their mind to the fact that each person is unique and different. They go by that step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it sounds like you're totally different.
Oh, I am. Yeah, I'm very different. You have to get the person's story. And I've had that other therapists that have referred to me. Like I remember one who referred someone in chronic grief, and she said, "Karen, could you tell me, what are you going to do with her?" And I said, "I can't tell you what I'm going to do until I see her."
Aha. I guess
right?
that's exactly what I was talking about.
That's right.
Yeah, right. She was going by a strategy and you were going by a direct experience.
That's right. You have to meet them and, and be able to, and then it always comes up what it is you're supposed to say.
Communication with the dead for future research. Why this is a good idea. Is this what you're talking about, kind of?
Well, that comes from, there's, have you heard of the Bix project in Las Vegas?
Can you explain it?
Sure. It's Robert Bigelow is a billionaire, and I think he lost quite a few people, a wife, a grandchild, and somebody else, I think. And so he, in I think it was 2020, started an essay contest that he put in the New York Times, that he was going to give over $1 million in prizes to paranormal researchers that could have enough proof to work in a court of law that there was life after death.
Oh.
Excuse me. So he 1,200 people asked for the applications, and 9 months later, 204 people submitted a 25,000 word essay. And then in November, he had 29 winners, and he gave out $1 million to $2 million worth of prizes. The first prize was $500,000 to a psychologist. His name is Jeffrey Mishlove, and he introduced people on PBS for, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years. He would interview them, physicists and therapists, all different kinds of people that were interested in, helping people to develop, and also in helping in spirituality. And so every reference in his paper was a video.
Every reference was a video?
Yeah, that he had done. So it was an amazing paper, because not only did you have the book name, but you had the person talking about, their reference.
Okay.
And then the next prize, I think, was 300,000, and that went to a Dutch person, a cardiologist in Holland, I think it is, and he had studied near-death experiences, and then the $150,000 one went to another psychologist. I can't think of. I think his was about a ghost in a machine, but he wrote about Scrooge.
Ghost in a machine. Interesting.
I think so. But they're on the Bix. It's Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies and Bix Incorporated, BICS. And you can go on, and the 29 essays are on there. You can download them or read them that way. And they're going to put them, of course, in a book at some time. So that research, that you only need research that could be proven in a court of law, is so much different than trying to get somebody to see their deceased father in a laboratory, which isn't going to work. You can't have clairvoyant happenings in a laboratory. They just don't happen there, because love is the greatest energy.
The problem. I think that's the problem. I always say love never comes when you're looking for it. It only hits you like a semi truck when you least expect it. And I believe that paranormal experiences are the same way.
Yes.
I always see full-bodied ghosts, full-bodied spirits. I have never seen a spirit that looked like a TV version of a spirit.
Okay.
They always, when I see them, they always look full-bodied, and they look as if they are not a ghost. But I always see them when I least expect them. And they usually are people that I knew were gone. And at the moment I thought, there they are. And then realizing I had a woman that was across the lane from me. She had a wonderful daughter-in-law that did all her, she did the climbing of the ladder, and she did the hardcore lawn work, and she was just so awesome. And one day she came down with COVID at the very beginning, before they barely knew what COVID was, and she was gone. I didn't know that. I was a neighbor across the road, right? So I'm going from my studio is 36 steps from my home, and I'm crossing the lane, and I'm seeing the daughter-in-law run out of the mother-in-law's house. And I'm thinking, oh, this must be a bad day for her. They must have just had a fight. And she goes, sometimes I don't even feel like I belong. And then she ran, and she crouched down by a tire by this truck. And she was smoking a cigarette even. And I thought, I should go over there and ask her if she's okay. But I didn't. I thought, no, this is a private moment. Went in the house, came back. She was gone. Next day, I find out the reason she had so many people over it was that woman's, death party, or whatever you call that. So I, as a full-bodied spirit, no ghost-like thing, but the anguish that she was in, because she had not realized why she hadn't accepted she was gone yet.
Yes. Yes.
And why I would imagine her with a cigarette. She was a smoker, but evidently there's cigarettes that go into the afterlife. And I was just, but that's how it always is for me. Always.
That's great.
But anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
She wasn't in the afterlife yet.
No, she wasn't. What would you call that stage, Karen?
Well, it's when the spiritual body has left the physical body, right? And I have in my book illustrations of how it goes out of the vagus nerve, which is your 10th and longest nerve in your body, and goes out the top of your head where a soft spot used to be. And I just had a nice conversation with a lady named Sarah Grace, and she worked with 911 on the ambulance in California for 15 years. And she had all these psychic abilities, but her family had always said, don't do that, don't stop that. And they had abused her for that. And so she never could figure out why she saw these things. But of course, she would come across all kinds of car wrecks and everything. And she said if it had been a traumatic death, that the spiritual body would be out there by the car and not, looking dazed. And
was it looking full bodied to her?
She said it, I don't know. She just said it was a spiritual body. So sometimes when they describe a spiritual body, it's like egg shaped and very, it looks like the person, but, very filmy. Anyway, she didn't say, I didn't ask her what it looked like, but she said, I just go up and tell them. And she said, they always know that I can see them. And I tell them, you just died. You died traumatically. And you have to go.
Wow. Oh, wow.
and you have to go to the light. Now, your spiritual body is not affected by gravity. So, so when she said they was standing there, I said, well, would they be standing there? Because they're anything I've ever read about a spiritual body outside of the physical body, they're hovering because they can't touch the ground. But anyway, it could all could be very different and individual, but then they just leave. But when she sees them, they're very confused. Now, if she didn't see them, they would stay there confused. Till how long? And
Yeah,
and I had a lady come in too who said her husband died in a car accident, and she had a dream about him. And I don't know how soon after he died, but I think it was pretty soon because he came to her in the dream, and she said he looked confused, right? So she said to him, Charlie, I just called everybody and told them about your death. And I said, oh, good. Well, maybe he didn't realize he was dead, and now you told him. That's good, And
wait a minute.
said,
Okay, now I'm confused. He was what now?
He was in a dream.
Oh, it was in a dream. Okay.
When they have these very vivid dreams,
right,
they're different than a regular dream.
Right.
So she just said, you look confused, and Charlie, you're dead. I just told everybody you died. I don't know what he said to her, what thought he gave her. But she said, well, that makes so much sense that he looked so confused. Because he was in a car accident, so it just happened so fast,
OMTimes TV.
Hi, my name is Anne-Marie Odell, and thank you for inviting me in for tarot and coffee. I offer 37 plus years of accurate, honest tarot channeling. Spirit comes through me as a feeling, an inner knowing. I call it the angel frequency. As you say your first name, I close my eyes and shuffle my well-worn card as I go into a deep calm. By phone, Skype, or Zoom, contact me at thecallingoflight.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
And then I have a daughter. I have 3 daughters, and one of them is on the other side. My oldest daughter, she passed away a few years ago from cancer. And so one day she came through. I was just, I had sent out a survey to mediums to see if they knew about the vagus nerve. Like how many of them knew how they get this information? And not very many, maybe 10 out of 100 said they'd heard about the vagus nerve, but they weren't sure how that worked. So
and
anyway,
vagus nerve, what is that again? That is
your vagus nerve is your 10th and longest nerve in your body. And it comes in at the top of your head, goes down and goes around your neck, touches your amygdala, which is fight, flight, or frozen, right? Then you go down, it goes down into your heart and goes down the spine into your stomach. So Darwin called that the pneumogastric nerve. And he said that you got triggered in your stomach and it told your brain, danger, danger. and your heart rate went up. So yeah, that's true. So I was studying that with a Dr. Porges up in the Cape Cod one summer for 5 mornings, and he was talking about using it with post-traumatic stress and panic disorder, because if you breathe into the count of 4 and then breathe out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, as far as you can go, the longer out breath calms the nerve, so that people could calm themselves down, in post-traumatic stress triggering or in panic by using this breath. And you can use it if you can't sleep also. Use it for anything. Some people call it a yoga breath, but it's a longer out breath, right?
Right.
So anyway, I don't know where I was before I started.
We were discussing your daughter and
Oh, okay.
and
So
your
then
medium.
So then this one medium from England went on my survey, and then anybody could have written to me, but not very many people did. And she wrote to me an email and said, I don't know about the vagus nerve. I don't think I helped your survey at all. But she said, I have a way where I asked like Alexa, so she doesn't go on, to play shuffle, and she believes the spirits pick the songs, and then she
Interesting.
she gets words from the song, right? So she said she'd like to show me her method, and I said, oh, that's great. This was during COVID, and so we were both a little bored, and so I learned about her method. And anyway, my daughter came through one day, and it was very meaningful to me. Number one, it was a surprise. And then she described her life review. Have you heard of that? That when they go to the other side, they have a life review where they watch a movie from the time they were born till the time they died, and they see everything that ever happened, and they see it from the other people's perspective. So I would think it's very humbling. She talked about that, and how she couldn't believe some of the things she had said, or when she said, I would never be like that now if I came back, that kind of stuff. So
would that be equivalent to Peter at the gate, judging your every move from your lifetime? I mean, in so many religions, there is always that you have to go back, you have to see your life, you have to review it, and then you get either the cane or you get to go up. I mean, that's the way that so many see it. For me, that's what I was trying to say, was that I believe that as we pass, that's happening to us in whatever way. It can be a lightning rod fast, or it can be a slow when you're suffering from an illness.
Yes.
But I believe that also, that's where I said, I believe we're constantly leaving messages for the ones that were most impacted by our life. Not to say that what you're saying is not true. That's just kind of my belief. Anyway.
Okay, good. So the life review, I understand you're the only one that judges it. Nobody else judges it that's with you, like the guardian angel or spiritual guides that you have. They just let you watch. You watch it.
You experience it. And interestingly, I also interviewed some spiritual workers from England, and they believed that, and this was they're very much into past life, and they believe that you have two choices. Your relatives come to be with you, and you have the choice to go with them. He said, I believe, no, go the other way. And he said, go where there is nothing. He believed nothing was the journey with nirvana, with the ultimate wisdom. But he said, if you go with the relatives, then you are forced to come back again and again and again and again, every time, to have another past, another redo of life. So he was very much into so many people fearing nothingness, where he believed that was the ultimate calm, and that ultimate calm was nirvana,
Okay.
or whatever word you want to call it.
Yes.
So he believed you go that way, not with the relatives who will take you into another past life or whatever. So yeah, I'm sorry I am interrupting.
No, that's all right. So I got interested in mediumship that way. And also because I had strongly suggested that clients go to a medium if they did have this chronic grief. And William James was father of American psychology. He and his wife lost a toddler child. And this is never taught in a university or a college. And so Mrs. James went to mediums to see where her baby was and brought her husband along. And then he got to study mediums, and he called them mental healers, and they studied them at the University or Massachusetts General Hospital. But that's never talked about when you learn about William James. And then Carl Jung in Switzerland, his mother was psychic, his grandfather was psychic, and his father was a minister. So he got to see all these levels of consciousness in his house. You never hear about the fact that his thesis for psychology was written about, a visit for 2 years every Tuesday to a medium. So I was reading all that thinking, well, why didn't we learn this? Because this was the part of beginning of psychology, right?
Oh my goodness.
And William James always said, if you want to know what a medium does, go and visit one. Which
they're all different. They're all different.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. But they all have this clairvoyant ability to see things like you can see people, spirits, and they give you their opinion of what's going on. And I have a medium list here at the office. And so I recommend certain people that they go to, so they're not out there floundering around about who to go to. And so that helps them too.
Were you always interested in the paranormal, or tell me about you as a kid, you growing up?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York, a very beautiful place, but not much going on. My mother didn't drive. My father was a truck driver, and he was gone and then back, and he was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. So we had that until I was I think a teenager. He stopped drinking. He never went to AA. So I learned. I watched my mother, and it was always, well, we'll ask your father. And I used to think, why? Why are we asking him? Because he's never really with it most of the time. Right. And so about 10 or 11 years old, I thought, if I ever marry an alcoholic, I'm leaving. Right? Well, of course, you tend to repeat.
Yes, you do.
So, of course, I've been married and divorced twice. And the first time was a very lovely gentleman. And but he didn't have any what do I want to say? Didn't seem to have any ambition. And I was interviewed one time about this. And so I described my first husband and said I divorced him. And the newspaper guy said, well, he sounds boring. I think that's why you divorced him. And so he put that in the newspaper article. And then when I married the second time, after about 5 or 6 years, I thought, this guy has a drinking problem too, but it looked different. Because my father went to a bar and came home when it closed. And my husband was a salesman, so he came home every night at 6, went straight to the bar in our house, and just stayed home and drank. And it just looked completely different. So I decided, after trying to help him, that didn't work. So I did a plan of about 2 years, and I divorced. And I had 3 daughters at that time. But I had been going back to college. And so by the time I got divorced, I was ready for graduate school, which only took 2 years. And then I started working. And I was lucky to go to Rutgers University, which was the only university in the United States at the time that had a minor in alcohol studies. And I thought, gee, my father drank, he drank. I think I'll take this side, part of the courses. And I learned all about my life from that teacher. And then when I graduated at a local college here, I taught a class on health and alcohol, and so that people wouldn't have to wait to get a master's degree to learn that alcohol was a disease, And then I just started working with families, and I loved what I was doing. And I think, when Jung said you find out what your soul purpose is, and then once you do that, your soul and your personality just kind of connect and are working together. That's what I wish for everybody, that they find a passion that they really love going to work.
I was always amazed. I too, I did not grow up with alcoholism, but I grew up with alcoholic behavior.
Okay.
I told you my stepfather was a Holocaust victim who
Yes.
suffered from PTS.
Yes.
And post-traumatic stress has alcoholic type symptoms. And I believe that right now, I used to believe that addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, excitement addiction, sexual addiction, it's really all about allism. It's all or nothing.
Right.
And so I found out from living with alcoholism and a couple of drug addicts that I had grown accustomed to living with darkness. Oh, it wasn't that I was used to living with alcoholism. I had learned to grow up with darkness.
Yes.
And so for me, it was familiar to be with men of darkness, not witchery or anything like that, but that carried the allism,
Yes.
the
Okay.
all or nothing. And so it took me a long time to figure out, why are they all so different and yet so much the same? And I believe that's it. It's all or nothing. You look at people that are addicted to extreme sports or extreme danger, or it's again another version of allism. And
they don't know how much is enough.
They don't. They just keep going and going and going until they drive their spouses crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
And their children, and they become strangers to their children because they have no time, really, a lot of them. But anyway, I'm sorry. Please go on again.
But they can't meet the emotional needs of the child because they're all tied up in their own story.
Allism. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And their addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I came from. And, I started working, and then I would go out and give lectures on the family and the disease concept of alcoholism. And things have changed with the alcohol field now. A lot of people know, don't drive drunk, get a driver, that kind of stuff. There's a lot more knowledge than there used to be. But so people come really from the dysfunction of living with that. So their parents were that, and they want to raise their children properly. And so they come and they have a lot of idealistic ideas. And so, they have to learn how to kind of ground all that.
And I used to think that I used to watch for drunk drivers, but now I realize that texting on the road is just equivalent to watching drunk drivers. It's the slow, it's the fast, it's the going off the road, exactly the same behavior. And I believe that texting is also a form of allism.
Yeah, that's true.
Excuse me. So, going back to your wonderful bulletins. So, we discussed the need to educate mental health professionals on spiritual experiences.
So I give webinars on the internet for that.
Okay, tell us where we can find those.
Okay, that would be at ceyoU.org, and I give maybe one every 6 weeks, and a lot on Jungian psychology, because Jung believed in spirituality, and he believed in transpersonal psychology, which is a psychology that tries to understand all of these different states of consciousness, not just our usual waking state. So when I learned about transpersonal psychology, I thought, oh, that's really what, interests me.
Say it again.
Transpersonal.
Oh, transpersonal.
And includes all the psychologies, and including Jung. A lot of psychologists don't include Jung. They don't want anything to do with him because Freud kicked him out. And
why is that? Tell me the story about that.
Oh, sure. So Freud was, excuse me, in Vienna, And he had decided that if you put people on the couch, had them lay down, that they gave you more information with their eyes closed, and they do. And he had started with hypnosis. And so Jung was in Switzerland, graduated, and became an assistant manager of a mental hospital that was a block long. And these people would come, and it was like a little town. They had, all kinds of workshops in the garden and all that kind of stuff for them. But most of the people had never learned to read or write. But Jung, when he started, and the staff lived on the second floor above the patients. And when Jung started, he didn't leave the place for 6 months. He just worked and worked. He was so excited about all these different people and wanting to know their stories. And anyway,
an allism.
That's right.
Mhm.
He was workaholic for sure.
Uh-huh.
And then he was reading about Freud doing all these things. So he went to visit Freud. One thing about Jung, he married well. So his wife had a lot of money. So he went to visit Freud. And the first time he visited him, they talked for 14 hours straight, because they're doing this, trying to do the same thing, right, in different countries. And so, but Freud was always a stickler on your unconscious is what happened in your family and sexual repression. It all had to do with sexuality. And after a few years, Jung said, no, people have more interest than just sex. And so that theory he didn't buy at all. And with Freud, you either bought his theory or you were out. So after about 6 years, Jung had written a book stating he didn't believe in the sexual theory. And he sent a copy to Freud. And within 3 days, he got a letter saying, I don't want to be friends anymore. And this friendship never meant anything to me, which wasn't true. He was hoping that Jung could take over for him because he was afraid that psychology was just going to become Jewish. And he didn't want that. He wanted some young blood in there.
He was afraid psychology was going to become Jewish?
Just Jewish. And he said, we have to have, all different kinds of people teaching this, right?
Okay.
So anyway, but then Jung was kicked out. And now he had a good job. He had a nice family. He had 4 or 5 kids. And but then he was president of this association and that association, and they all didn't want him anymore. Freud didn't want him. So he had a crisis in his life. And then he started having these terrible dreams, which are wonderful for people that have mental illness, because that's what they called it then, that he was mentally ill. And he would go at night, and he had these black and white, books that we all wrote in, and he would write down his dreams and make diagrams. And that happened for years. And as he was doing that, he developed analytical psychology, his own psychology. And after about, a few years, he put the books aside. And then eventually he decided that all of that material was wonderful. So he got a red leather book, a big book, and he started drawing and putting his notes and giving the stories that he had that, brought him out of his crisis with Freud, where he, was really feeling inferior and,
I suppose he was
abandoned. So, and that's called the Red Book, and it's a wonderful book. And it's all this art in there that he drew, but he said it's not art, it's unconscious material. And Jung believed the unconscious has an intelligence of its own. So that's where we get intuition from, and these ideas. And that's where spiritual experiences are activated, in our unconscious. And I believe they're activated by the soul. And you get the spiritual experience you need.
About soul psychology.
I beg your pardon. I didn't hear all that.
Isn't that part of your book, Soul? What was it? Psychology of the soul.
Of the soul and the paranormal. So what is like developing your soul, right? Mm-hmm. And his unconscious had 5 levels. So the first level was what happened to you, and let's talk about that. The second level was what happened to your parents, and how did that affect you? Let's talk about that. The third level was DNA. So what kind of ancestors did you have? Because he believed that ancestors sometimes left jobs for us to do, but we didn't know that. The fourth level was your country or your culture. How did that affect you? And then the fifth level was your self/soul. So he was probably the only one who said, because he came from a family of ministers, that we all have a soul, and then the soul purpose. So by the time you do all that with somebody, as you do that, you're clearing the levels of the unconscious, because they're telling you all these stories and, writing letters nobody's going to get, and, beating the chair with a rubber bat and doing all this stuff. Then your soul purpose kind of comes up, and you know more about what you want.
I believe the soul purpose can be almost hidden and then pop up sometimes. For myself, I remember I was working in a packing house as a single mother, surviving. I also played several instruments and did music on stage, and I was very creative. But on the other hand, I never would envision that I would leave that to become a full-time intuitive worker. I say intuitive worker because a lot of people turn off on the word psychic. And so it came, everything stepped in. Sometimes I say to people, they say, I feel so lost. I feel like I'm in a fog. I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something. I feel like something is about to happen. And that's when I say, then let it, stop trying to fight it. Stop trying to analyze it. Let it happen. Because I think it's when you start trying to control everything and analyze it that it takes twice as long for the soul purpose to happen. And for me, it was just that one day that I suddenly began, and it was just like it got thrown at me. And all of a sudden I was able to leave a work that was not my kind of thing at all.
Right.
And I was able to have a studio soon that was presented for a phenomenal cheap price. Everything fell boom, 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 boom. And transpersonal hypnotherapy, Reiki, all of those things began to fall in place. Would I ever think it would? I never did. So yes, I believe that. Soul purpose.
Yes. And many times you get it through intuitive thoughts, and most people don't understand they need to listen to their intuition, right?
Right.
And I have a story about that. When I was at a conference in New York City one day, and then, for 5 days. So I had all my nice clothes with me and my computer and all that. And we went down to the Village, and we drove down, and
nice.
We were going to have lunch, right? So I get out of the car and I have this thought, this car is going to be robbed. So I said, yeah, I don't think we should eat here. I think we should go to New Jersey and eat on the water. Come on, let's do that. Oh, come on, we got a parking space and everything, and we're going to go shopping. And so I think, okay. So I go shopping, and we come back and put the stuff in the car and go home. And when we opened the trunk, it was completely empty.
Oh, no, you were right.
So I thought to myself, that little voice, it's not loud enough, right? So after a couple of days, I thought, no, Karen, you have to listen more. That's the problem.
It's loud enough. But then again, your intuitive thought would have been poo-pooed by them, because unless theirs was in sync with yours, they would have done the same thing.
But if I have had it now and I have that thought, we would go to New Jersey. I wouldn't stay there.
Right. Well, I think that you live and learn, and you live and learn to listen to that little voice. And I do believe that as people get older, I believe there's a point in a woman's life where she is run by her hormones. And I believe that when those hormones begin to ease up, and we can suddenly tune in so very, very strongly to that voice that was always there, but it just seems to settle in and say, hey, how you doing? I've been waiting for you, and when it does, it's just the most amazing, wonderful thing.
It is.
So why don't you give us the name of your book again, the name of your website, and we can
okay. The name of the book is The Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. And if you're dealing with death of with children around, I also wrote another little book, Grandma, What is a Soul? And that's for kids. And it has a section for parents at the back. And my website is KarenEHerrick.com. And you can go on there, and there's free podcasts and stuff, and, just kind of watch me do other stuff. And I welcome, any questions they have after they listen to this webinar or podcast with you. And I thank you.
This chain